Welcome to Grievances with the Girls. Today we'll be talking about Everson v. Ewing Township School Board. This is a 1947 case about the Establishment Clause and generalized grievances. In this case, there was a New Jersey statute that authorized local school districts to make rules and contracts for the transportation of children to and from schools. The appellee in this case is the Township School Board, and they are acting pursuant to this statute to authorize the reimbursement of parents who are expending money to send their children to school on public school buses. Not school buses, just public buses. The transportation of the children to schools included not just public schools, but also Catholic parochial schools. So the appellant is suing because he is a district taxpayer and he is challenging the right of the school board to reimburse the parents. The appellant contends that the statute and the resolution passed pursuant to it violated both the state and federal constitutions.
So before we get into the actual opinions of this case, we're going to talk about, does this case have standing? Standing is the Supreme Court's ability to hear a case, or judiciability is the better word. Standing is a piece of judiciability. In order for the court to have standing, the plaintiff must have an actual case or controversy, meaning that both sides actually have a conflict that they need settled. There must be a harm or an injury to the plaintiff, and specifically that wrong has been caused by the defendant, meaning that parties are related and the harm is concrete. Lastly, court must be able to redress the case, meaning that they can compensate the victim if necessary, or they can undo the wrong that has been done to them. Here, that is a little complicated because this is a generalized grievance, which Sydney is going to talk about next.
Yeah, so generalized grievances is a prudential standing requirement, meaning it's been formed based off of the court's wisdom. It means that they generally prohibit cases involving these generalized grievances, and this means individuals are suing from the only injury as a citizen or a taxpayer, concerned with having the government follow the law. The Supreme Court has recognized only one exception where taxpayer standing is permitted, and it's to challenge government expenditures as violating the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. It's the provision that prohibits Congress from making any law respecting the establishment of religion. And that is what this case deals about. It is a perfect illustration of the exception when a court will take a generalized grievance case. Before we get into the meat of this case, we'd like to hear a word from our sponsor.
This episode is brought to you by Pittsburgh Regional Transit, serving your public or your Catholic needs.
Thank you, Pittsburgh Regional Transit. Back to this case. So, as we previously said, the appellant first starts out by saying that it authorized the state to take by taxation the private property of some and bestow it upon others to be used for their own private purposes. This allegedly violates the Due Process Clause in the 14th Amendment. Second, he said the statute resolution forced inhabitants to pay taxes to help support and maintain schools, which are dedicated to Catholic faith, and this is a violation of the Establishment Clause. The court focuses on public service approach. They said the New Jersey legislature has decided that a public purpose will be served by using tax-raised funds to pay the bus fares of all school children, including those who attend these schools. And the fact that a state law passed to satisfy a public need coincides with the personal desires of the individuals most directly affected is an entirely inadequate reason for the court to say that a legislature has erroneously appraised the public need. They further go on to say that subsidies and loans to individuals such as farmers and homeowners and to privately owned transportation systems, as well as many other kinds, have been a commonplace practice in our state and national histories. And then they go into the Establishment Clause can of worms, might I say. So they say the issue was suggesting that taxation for transportation of children to church schools constitutes support of a religion by the state. And the Establishment Clause states that the state shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And they go into a discussion about the history of the clause and the importance of that separated by a wall, a high and impenetrable wall. The clause itself, some may argue, is not to completely inhibit the practice of religion, but to inhibit the support of a certain over another, because it's supporting the public good for all. They said that we must be careful in protecting the citizens of New Jersey against state-established churches, but to be sure that we do not inadvertently prohibit New Jersey from extending its general state law benefits to all its citizens without regard to their religious beliefs. And they could not say that the First Amendment prohibits New Jersey from spending tax-raised funds to pay the bus fares of these pupils. That's what the general opinion is saying. Now we're going to touch on dissents of the case.
So I'll talk about the Jackson dissent first. Jackson pretty much attacks every part of the majority. He does so rather eloquently, but he starts by saying that the Township of Ewing is not furnishing transportation to children in any form, and it's not performing a public service. He says that as passengers on public buses, the students are traveling fast and no faster, and are safe and no safer than if their parents had been reimbursed. He also mentions that the Act permits payment for transportation to parochial schools or public schools, but it prohibits reimbursement for transportation to other private schools that are maybe operated for profit or associated with other religions. It was also somewhat shocking to me, Jackson's use of indoctrination. He feels that these Catholic schools are sort of the foundation for the Catholic faith. They're what keep the Catholic Church growing, and students there are being indoctrinated with their faith. Jackson also attacks the majority's analogy about how this is a public service like police or fire safety. Jackson and the majority both agree that laws for public purposes are fine, but that goes for things like welfare, health, education, entertainment, security. He feels that the court here is making a public business out of religion, and that is not constitutional in his view. Overall, he feels that the greater purposes of the Constitution do not depend upon the approval or convenience of those they restrain. It is not fair to only reimburse the Catholic school parents and the public school parents. All parents need to be reimbursed, if any are to be.
So, my opinion by Justice Rutledge is also a dissent, and I think his opinion serves as a really good narrative explanation of how we came to the Establishment Clause exception of general grievances. He goes back to a dual rule the whole time of the Establishment Clause protects religion as much as it has to restrict it, and he goes through an entire textual analysis of that. Then he goes into the historical analysis that actually explains this exception, and he discusses a bill that was introduced in Virginia which would allow taxpayers to choose if their tax money went to a certain church or if it was just used for education broadly. And two of our founding fathers, Madison and Jefferson, were completely against this. Essentially, Madison says, "There is not a shadow of right in the general government to intermeddle with religion. This subject is, for the honor of America, perfectly free and unshackled. The government has no jurisdiction over it." It says further in here, "In no phase was he more unrelentingly absolute than in opposing state support or aid by taxation." So I think because this is such an important piece of our foundation, has been recognized as the exception to the generalized grievance. Lastly, I think that his opinion differs the most from Jackson's, because Jackson was saying, well, this can't be a public good because this is only applying to public schools and private Catholic schools. Whereas Rutledge says, this shouldn't apply to any religious school at all under the Establishment Clause. What did you guys like about your opinions? What did you think was odd?
I liked the idea of serving the public good, not treating parents that choose to send their kids to religious schools differently than the parents that choose to send their kids to public schools, because the parents who are sending the children to private schools are still paying taxes that go to the public schools.
Yeah, and that was at the beginning of Jackson's. He said, like, I feel for the Catholic parents who are paying these same exact taxes and then also paying their own expenses on top of it.
Yeah, I think he just acknowledged that that is their choice. And
right, yeah. He does say, like, you do have this other option. If you wanted government support, this would have been it. But again, it's weird because it's 1947 and I don't know what the
climate.
Yeah, I don't
atmosphere,
know
yeah.
what it was. Like, I really liked the sentence in your opinion of just because a law gets close to the line doesn't mean it should be struck down. Like, if it's not crossing the line. I think that's maybe a policy reason for this exception to general grievances, because the line is maybe hard to see. So I think the court does have to rule on this.
It's interesting and it's not very clear. I think when you touch on beliefs, personal beliefs, it's truly you are either making it harder for parents to send their kids to Catholic schools than you are making it to send to public school. That means you are inadvertently treating religions differently.
Thank you
Really awesome.
What
There's
is
random
going
drilling.
And with that, with the random drilling, we're gonna close it. Thank you for watching and in your own way participating in this discussion with us. We hope this helped you understand generalized grievances better. And don't forget to get a free ride with PRT.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. Sponsored by Grievances with the Girls.
Yes. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.